Yeah, I've been a member of the Raynham Old Colony Model Railroad Club for about 20 years or so. And over the time, we've kind of gone from like 14 to 18 people down to 14. We tend to keep a low number of members because of the size of our aisles and so on. And so I put together a little PowerPoint to talk about the club. It has a couple of video, it has a mainline running video.
The cat was sitting by your door looking for you.
And so let's start out here. This is
Just left.
our
Just left with
Andy,
like
could you mute everybody?
They're about 10 minutes
think,
by your door looking for you.
Can I unmute? Okay.
let's get this
Okay, I can do that for you.
Okay, there we go. The Old Colony Model Railroad Club
I
at
know that.
770 Broadway,
Yeah, I know.
Raynham, was founded by two still active members in
Well,
February of
Just let
1990.
him look.
The room we rent in the old Raynham Barrel Factory was the
Okay.
former site of a furniture store, so there was plenty of space to set up the layout in our 50 by 50 foot suite. The members decided to model the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad in a time period post-war era. In this time period, we can run steam and diesel power. However, members can run their own non-specific equipment anytime we are not engaged in a group operating session. Our rail is mostly code 83 and switches on cork and vinyl roadbed. There is code 100 in the staging yard. Our minimum curb is 34-inch radius on the main line and 25-inch radius on the branch line. In 2008, we changed the layout from analog DC to DCC, digital command control. We currently run the NCE DCC system. The layout goes from Providence to New Haven with a branch line through Willimantic. The staging yard is accessed via a tunnel and is considered New York City. This is a picture of the layout as we were building it in the early 90s. It gives you a good idea of the framework beneath the layout. And you can also see, I don't know if you can see my mouse here. This part here, the lower part is the main line, the upper part is our branch line. And here's a good close-up of the main line, which is on the forward and right side, and the branch line above it, where the branch line crosses over the main line. And this is eventually going to end up being Willimantic. And you can see Providence in the background. Now, this is not finished. This was taken back around, probably 2010. There's been a lot of scenery done since then. We almost lost our building at one point, and our president at the time said, challenge us, do whatever you wanted to do. And I wanted to paint some backdrops for mountains and hills and stuff like that. And one mistake I made, you'll see in the center aisle, the nice blue sky. I should have looked at the rest of the sky so it would have matched and would have blended in so you wouldn't see it so much. When you're in the aisle, it's not so bad, but when it's looking at it from an angle or from this overhead view, it really stands out. Also, the branch line does have a lot of mountains through that part of Connecticut. I mean, what we'd consider mountains. It's a little too mountainous. When I have on the right-hand aisle there, you'll see more rolling hills, although not a little bit too mountainous in a way. This shows Providence to the right and comes around, and then Willimantic in the center aisle there, and then our two other aisles. And you can see how our aisles can be a little bit tight. We have several master builders in the club who do a fantastic job on buildings and scenery. However, we encourage everyone, no matter their skill level and of expertise, to build buildings and scenery. We have a building permit system so that we don't end up with people working on an area and suddenly somebody jumps in on top of it and starts changing it, which actually happened a couple of times. We had a member then was asked to leave was trying to backdate our layout to the 1920s because that's what he wanted to model. And so we did institute the building permit. The permit is applied for and then presented to the entire membership and approved. The following are scenes around the club. This is Providence with an engine service facility, the yard, and some areas for boxcar unloading. You can see in the far background, that's the staging area, which we consider New York City. And here's another view of Providence from behind. And if you look way over, we have a lot of other things along the walls, memorabilia, things like that. And you can see how we did the, why am I pointing at my screen? You probably can't, that doesn't help. You can see the more or less rolling hills, which is a little more emblematic of Providence area. A little close up of some of the work that some of our members do. And this is the area from the right, goes over the dark colored bridge is the double track main line. It comes in and goes to the left there, circles around and goes back out again. I'm pointing at the screen again. Then one of our members built this entire power plant area there and all scratch built. And I kind of like the hills in the background myself.
Jeff, if you want to point at something, you should really use your mouse cursor to do
Yeah,
that.
I should do that. Yeah. And you can see how when we're not doing an operating session or something like that, we can have a wide variety of motive power on the layout. I mean, CSX and a big boy. And it's just fun. We're there to have fun. Evolution of an area, a coal yard on the main line, the viaduct on the branch line, which is also known as the airline. On the main line between Providence and New London, there was an area that had limited potential for buildings, but could still be made a showpiece. We have a lot of vertical scenery, but I decided to see if I could make it interesting beyond the usual rock walls. I decided to scratch build a viaduct for the upper branch line and then paint the backdrop to match and give it a reason. On the level with the main line, one of our members built the coaling area. Here's my building the viaduct by making a whole series of castings of a stone wall and then cutting it into arches and gluing it back to the castings on the background and a couple little tunnels for the stream to come through, kind of modeled after the viaduct in Sharon, which you can see up here is a picture I took of the viaduct in Sharon to give you an idea of what to do. And here's installing it on the branch line where before there was just I don't know if you call it a trestle, would be raw bench work holding up the track. And then I painted in the mountains and a valley to give a reason why you had a viaduct there. And just another angle, one of our members had built the mountain there and added the rocks, and I tied it in with the mountains in the background. I mean, it's almost more like the West, but it's kind of a artistic license for Eastern Connecticut. And there's the finished version with the coal yard in the foreground. And just up a shot showing the track going behind the mountain. And when you see that from this angle, you can see how the perspective of the mountains has changed, even though they're painted there. So they didn't change, but our view of it changed. And from another angle, the double track main line on the right-hand side here, and then the coal yard. And we try to have a lot of switching over here to the right. you can see where we're working in another area for kind of a mountainous area to tie in the lower track with the upper track. And a nice close-up of the work that was done modeling the coal yard. And here we have New Haven, and there's a camera crew down here and a band. One of our members spent quite some months, and I don't know how many hundreds of figurines he put into this area, and it really came out phenomenal. It was a lot of work and catches a lot of dust too. And some little more detail of the factory area of New Haven. And this is the Navy Yard in this area with a tunnel going into the mountain. Up above is the branch line and a sand and gravel pit up on the branch line. And then our New Haven and yeah, the other one was New London. I'm sorry, New London. This is New Haven here. One of our members built a viaduct here going with a street underneath it, and the train ran down the center of it to get over to and back down onto the main line. So it ties in from Providence, New Haven, and comes down off of the branch line into the New Haven yard. And they're currently working on a produce area for New Haven with a lot of switching opportunities. We try to get a lot of switching as well as mainline running. And we have a beer plant and manufacturing warehouses. And as you can see, the main line up above the town of New Haven. And another view of New Haven itself with the brewery all the way, and the main train station with the tracks that go underneath the train station, and the loading, the passenger platforms are down there. And every good train layout needs a junkyard. And this was one of the first areas that was finished on the layout by a member who passed away. And we've kept it there kind of in memory of him. The branch line on our layout is known as the airline. This is the actual designation given to the line from Providence through Willimantic and down to New Haven. It went to the very hilly areas of Eastern Connecticut. We modeled the town and railroad area of Willimantic, as well as East Hampton, known as Belltown. The branch line, when it comes into New Haven, is on an elevated railway stretch built by a former member. The branch line comes out of New Haven over the Silver Bridge and over around behind the main line, and then back over by the power plant and starts to go up onto the upper level. And it takes quite a while. So it's a very gentle slope to the upper level. And here's how Willimantic, which we had shown the original framework for, is when it's completed here. A lot of these were not pre-built, but just regular kits. And then we did a lot of modifications of kits, like Robert's printing here was cut down to fit. And if you'll notice this building here with the gray stone, that's the same castings I used for the viaduct, but I cut every individual window in the building, which took quite a while on my scroll saw. And then we have Main Street running in Willimantic down to the printing company. And another view of the main street of Willimantic. And then an area here we're working on putting into all trees and make this a large forest to isolate the town of the factory of Willimantic from the typical view was when you walk in the door of the club. And all these large buildings were all scratch built. And in behind, you can't really see it. It will show up in one of the videos that we also have some paper buildings from that we did on our computer and put them on foam core, and they've actually held up very well. And you can see how we've started on the forest for Willimantic. And then up on one of the mountains above New London, we have the Sand and Gravel Company. And this is Belltown. This part here, somebody just stuck there on the track. There's a dairy there. And this is one of the paper buildings that I made on the computer using just regular printer paper and foam core. And another view of it, of course, the roof is removable and was not put back on correctly. But I like buildings with a lot of angles to them. And you always have to have some abandoned track work on your layout along with a abandoned freight car and a burnt out factory. And another of our members was building an area just for scenery, and kind of it's an abandoned line, and just to fill in an area that had a lot of problems for scenery. What could we do with it? So we decided to do the forest and a trestle and so on. And we did a forest on the backdrop also. And the branch line again. Now we have two videos of the old Colony Club. The first one is a complete run of the main line from New Haven to New London to pick up a load, and then through to Providence and a return to New Haven. The second video is of switching tank cars in the yard at Willimantic. And so we're going to start this. I'm not sure how loud it's going to show, if I'll be able to talk over it or not, but we're going to start, coming through the yard at New Haven, and then all the way around to Providence and back again. And we're working our way through the yard. You can see the engine house, roundhouse here. And just as we pass the freight cars, to the left is our turntable. And on the wall is a plan for the original layout, or thought for the original layout. We kind of followed it, but not totally. And we go under the branch line. And try to get a lot of scenery in all little different areas, which you might not even be able to notice unless you're doing a train cam. And we're going to go by the passenger station. And over here to the left is the US Post Office. Another view of the junkyard. Cross over the branch line where it's coming down on the ground. Building in progress. As you can see, there's a lot of track that has not been ballasted yet. And so that's still things for the members to enjoy doing. And you can see how we have a lot of vertical scenery. And we put up some plexiglass to protect from when if we would have an open house or from just people bumping it and so on. Now, if I remember when I was doing this, I did a little movie magic to reverse to get into New London. There's not a crossover at that point. And we had done the post-war era so that members could run their steam as well as diesels. And one of our members hates the McGinnis era of New Haven, so we tried to hold it back down to the just early post-war. Then we're gonna go get a couple more boxcars. You can see our workshop in the other room here. And then we're back on the main line heading for Providence. And underneath the branch line, seldom seen area of the layout. And if I remember correctly, this is westerly that we're going through now. Areas closer to our main entrance to the layout have had the ballasting done and so on. And this is where we're just putting up the plexiglass, which is why it still has the wrapper paper on it. And then up here is a long icing house, and over here is our area for storing passenger cars. And a nice lit up switch tower. Coming over the bridges heading towards Providence. Past the Providence train station. And then we're going to circle around the yard and head back out of Providence. Yeah, I really like the DCC and sound locomotives. It takes about 15 minutes of fairly quick running to go around the entire layout. So you can do a lot of mainline running, but there's also a lot of switching opportunities too. back through the tunnel again. We use tortoise switch machines, they're the slow motion machines for all our turnouts. And have the controls right by the turnout on the fascia board. Now, I don't notice, anybody noticed that the switch was thrown against us there, and a little movie magic, I managed to keep the train going. Coming along again, along some of that vertical scenery. And getting closer to New Haven. And entering the yard again. Now the website address is incorrect because after I made the video, they dumped our old website and created a new one, which I think is oldcolonyrailroadclub.com. Now, let's see, I'm wondering, how do we stand on time for the rest of the evening?
You're fine.
Okay, because this video here, switching Willimantic, can be a little bit like watching paint dry. And so maybe what I'll do is move on to my layout. And then, because there's a short video there also. And because I can't remember whether this one was, yeah, this one's like 15 minutes. And that would be a little bit long unless you're really into switching, you know. And so what we can do, oh, it's going to move it anyway, is we'll go over to my layout, which is the Conrail transition era with a steam museum, which is how I justify running steam in the 1970s. And my home layout originally was, this is the same size as my original home layout. But then one day my wife came in and said she wanted shelving in the basement. And so I was able to save this part of the layout and along the wall here. The rest was all torn down. And then I managed to build her a shed in the backyard. And in the meantime, I said, okay, rather than just the double track main line that I had in my right-hand part of my layout, I'd build a cement plant because Lehighton and the Lehigh Valley were big into cement plants and so on. And so I have my diesel area over here. I'm sorry, diesel area over here, and Conrail engine house and so on here. And then my steam museum here, so I can run all my steam. And I have a double track main line, and which runs behind the cement plant, plus a yard in the cement plant, as well as a yard over here. I have 75 switches, not a single electric switch. They're all manual. I use all Pico switches, so you can just, with your fingers, throw every switch. That way, there's no wiring. I don't have to worry about which button does what. You reach up and you throw the switch. And I've only, over the course of about 10 years, I've only had to replace 2 switches. And so it's worked out fairly well. And I also use NCE DCC radio control. And because there's just no way you could block something like this with 75 switches. And some of the guys at the train club laugh at me and make fun of me saying, you don't have a single piece of uncut flex track. And I say, yes, they do. Over here in the main line, there's a piece of flex track that was not cut for a switch. So I don't know what they're talking about. This is the engine house. I added a stall to it and then detailed the inside of it. And I just love steam. And then some of the factories, the switching that I have on the layout. And I added a bunch of ivy to the back of the building and so on. And here's my main yard. You can see the engine here is coming down one of the double main line. And we can put up 50 cars up in the yard here. And then we have a Atlas Powder Company up here. Whoops, what did I do? Go back. And areas I'm still working on, a dairy, actually 2 dairies, a switch tower, and then every layout needs to have a graveyard. And again, lots of switching opportunities, a lot of background. I painted the backdrop on it also to give the feeling of hills. And again, as you can see, I haven't done any real ballasting on the layout. Just, I think, laziness as much as anything. And here's a video of running my layout with a consist. And we're coming out of the yard. Here I'm running at a little more realistic speed than I did at the old Colony Club. I also like to have a lot of flats on the backdrop to give it a little more depth. Yep. Yeah, it's really great with DCC being able to run multiple engines without worrying about um, blocking it and so on. And then coming again around to the yard. One of the things over here is the bulkhead to the basement. So I have a lift out section so that if we have to get out of the basement through the bulkhead, I can just take it out. And when we had to replace our washing machine and also when we replaced our furnace, that's where I had to take that part of the track out, but it just lifts right out. And I think, yeah, that's the, okay, then there is another short video of returning to the service facility at the end of the day. And this one was kind of a wide angle lens. And I probably have a mix of about 50-50 of engines with sound and engines without. And you can kind of see a lot of the little tabs for the switch, throwing the switches. And when I throw a switch, it kills that section of the track. So you're not having half a dozen engines idling all the time. I could actually run about 4 operators, although 3 is a lot, most I've ever had. And I'm kind of famous for my duct tape on buildings to hold them together while I'm still working on them. I also tried to label every industry in alphabetical order, like Gerber Foods and Kistler Baking, because that way it's a little easier to remember where you're going. And that's it. Let me stop sharing. And we're back again. Anybody have any questions?
I turned the mute lock off, so people who want to talk, just unmute yourself and speak.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for that. That's pretty amazing. It's an awful lot of work there.
It's a lot of fun. Because of the COVID, I haven't been down to the Old Colony Club in quite a while, but having my home layout, I can always just go down the basement and hide. One of the problems I run into is I also do solar astronomy and solar imaging, as well as bird photography. And they're all hobbies that can take up a lot of time. Especially with the good thing about the trains, though, you can be working on buildings, you can working on the layout, where I'm constantly getting yelled at by my wife and family saying you're spending too much time on the computer when you sit there working on your solar astronomy or on the birds in Photoshop for hours on end. And they say you're just spending too much time at the computer. And so I was okay, I'll go downstairs and work on the trains.
It's awesome.
Go ahead, Eric.
I just said that's awesome. Hobbies are great.
Oh, it is. It's fantastic. I had one of my youngest son's friends had got upset at me or something. And one day said, I have no respect for a man who has trains in the basement. And I said, well, one of these days you're going to have kids and you're going to realize what a wonderful thing it is to have things that you can get your kids interested in too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great job. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
One of the comebacks for the person who said trains in the basement, you say, there's a lot of things we can't control in the world, but down here, I am the boss.
Yep. Well, who is it? Is it David Bowie who has that huge train layout?
Rod Stewart, I think.
Rod Stewart.
Rod Stewart. Yeah.
Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
So you have no respect for Rod Stewart either, eh?
He's packing that layout and bringing it back to England. He's moving home.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Moving from LA to England, and he's going to set it up back home. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is. That is.
He'd be on tour, and he would have a set of tools and things to work on kits while he was touring. That is so cool. I mean, that to me is like the epitome of cool.
That was part of his requirements when he was booking the thing.
Yeah.
He had to have that stuff, and I think he had a separate room just for that stuff.
He did. He had a separate room for that. Was his workshop while he was building, and so he could build stuff while he was on tour.
And on top of that, maybe because he had a lot of money, his modeling was first class.
Absolutely.
I mean, some of his stuff looked as good as George Celios' stuff.
Yeah.
He did have help.
Well, he had help with the building layout, but I think he did a lot of the buildings himself.
Yeah, the buildings he did. He did have help with the layout, but the buildings he did.
That's cool.
So Jeff, can people get to see the Rainham layout?
At this point, I think we're still kind of locked down because of the COVID. But we're open every Wednesday evening. And occasionally, we used to be open every Saturday, but now it's just a few members tend to go up there. So it's Wednesday evenings from like 5 to 8. They're on the second floor of the old barrel factory. And I'm sure that if you showed up with a mask and not a crowd or something, they'd welcome you in and show you around.
Great, that's great.
Yeah.
How many engines do they have? And how much rolling stock? Any idea?
We have an inventory. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head of club engines. I think there's only about 10, and there's about 50 cars rolling stock, but we have a lot of members' equipment on the layout.
Mm-hmm.
And as they say, unless we're running an operating session, you can run any equipment you want.
Gotcha.
And so it's just, everybody just has a lot of fun.
Nice.
About an address or a phone number or a
It's-
contact person, Jeff?
It's 770 Broadway in Raynham, which is on Route 138. You go down 495, get off of 138 towards Raynham, down about half a mile at most on the right-hand side. There's a huge milk bottle, 3 stories tall on the left-hand side, right across from the barrel factory. And that's like the landmark that, you know, if you see the milk bottle, you want to turn right into the factory.
Thank you.
Yep.
And you say the Old Colony Railroad Club, they're all Pico switches or I mean tortoise
No.
switches?
They're using tortoise switches on the, it's all code 883 on the Old Colony. On my layout, I have all Pico switches, and mine's all code 100, just a lot easier to deal with. And I like the Pico switches, and I didn't want to have any electric switches at all.
That's good.
On the subject of Rod Stewart, FYI, he just packed up his whole layout here in the US in, I believe, something like 12 or 14 containers and just shipped it to England to his castle.
Wow.
Oh, that's huge.
If you look it up on the news feed, you'll find a whole article about it and some photographs.
Jeff, somewhere during your video, and I'm just concerned about this. I don't live very far away from the club. And actually, I helped run a club that used to be in Taunton, that when Prop 2.5 came through, we lost our building.
Yep.
And really, you know, and I hear you mention something about your building. How do you stay secure in that where you are? I know the location.
Well, basically, we have the doors are always locked. And, you know, we also almost lost our lease or our rent at one point because they sold the building. We still have a sweetheart deal with the cost, something like $300 a month or something, which is dirt cheap for that amount of space. But we're always on pins and needles too, because they're going to be doing something with the old rail line behind the building, and that might affect the building. We're not sure yet, which is why I still have my home layout. But they do have, you know, we haven't ever been robbed. We do have a security camera, which only helps after the fact. But, you know, I've been down there a lot of nights. I've never felt that it's not like Brockton, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you guys used to run your show at the Holiday Inn.
Right, correct.
And now with the COVID.
Yeah, they put paid to the show, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
One of the best deals I know is the Bay State Society in Roslindale. They own the building, they rent out the downstairs, and they're secure in their second floor.
Yep.
Location.
Yep.
South Shore has done the same thing. They own that building now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty expansive down there too.
Yeah, that's a nice layout down there. Yep.
It's huge.
Yeah, but I think you have to be able to hand lay a switch and stuff like that before they'll let you into their club.
There's a lot of talent down there.
I remember when they were in the bottom of the pizza place down in which I ran, you know. So
yes.
Yeah.
Under the laundromat.
Yeah, if you guys ever get a chance to see it, it really, no offense, in person, it's a very good looking layout. You'd be very, very impressed with the fellas. You would.
Yeah, the COVID's really put a lot of hurting on a lot of shows, a lot of open houses, club visiting, things like that, you know?
You know, we don't even have some of these small vendors are surviving.
Right.
That do the shows.
Right.
We got to keep this hobby going.
Well, one of the biggest problems is getting not so much young people, because the kids like it, But once they discovered the two smells, gasoline and perfume, you lose them for a while and you don't get them back till what, 40s and 50s.
Well, we work on that pretty good. Yeah, we try to
Yeah, but
keep
that's-
kids involved.
That's been going on for 50 years. Yes.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I think we all go through that. You get busy with a young family and your obligations change.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
That's
Jeff,
why
I hope to hook up with you at some time down the road. I'm down here in Kingston, so I'm not that far away.
Yep. Yep. What I tried to do with my kids when I had 3 boys, and I tried to get them involved in a bunch of different activities and just see which ones would stick. And so we had a original single layout in the basement with a single track around the center, a 4x8. And they kind of liked that, but they really weren't that much into it. We did a lot of Boy Scouts and soccer and stuff like that. But I enjoyed the train. So because I still have my original Lionel trains from when I was a kid. And, would have loved to have, if they had S scale that they had now, back when I started with the HO, it might have been tempted to go with S, because now there's a lot more S gauge stuff. But, the older I get, I'm glad I didn't go N, because that's impossible. They're so small. The older I get, HO even seems a little bit small.
Have you thought of O and 30?
Yeah, I know somebody is doing that, but I've got too much into HO,
I went to the National Narrow Gauge Convention with John Doyer, and I asked him if he'd been vaccinated. He said, "We're in Maine. What did he be vaccinated for?" I says, "John, if the narrow gauge bug bites you in the ass, you're in big trouble." Now he bids against me on eBay.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I had my way and I could afford the space, S scale I think is perfect. I've always loved that, but my problem is that what I want to do is mostly supported in HO scale.
Yep.
So it's like, what do you do? I mean, I could scratch build everything, but it's like, my God. And I agree with you. When I see the S scale layouts it shows, I think it's really a nice scale and looks really, really awesome.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot more available for HO figures, vehicles, buildings, scenery, which, because was it 80% or something of the hobby is HO?
Yeah.
It seems
Yes.
like no matter what scale or gauge or whatever that you model in, there's always something out there trying to bite you in the butt saying, "Hey, come on over and try me." Malcolm is posting on the NYO and W these days quite a bit. And those little camelbacks, boy, they really are nice looking.
Yeah.
In fact, I told him the other day, "Stop, you're trying to corrupt me."
Well, it's like I want to get a big boy, but with 18-inch radius curves in my home layout, it's like, I'd love one. I've seen the one in Scranton. Yeah, there's a Scranton at the train museum there.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just like, wow, and it might work on the 18-inch, but not well, and just wouldn't look right either.
They stole that engine from Bellows Falls.
Yep.
The old steam town, the real steam town.
Yep.
When did the Steamtown leave Bellows Falls?
Ooh.
1969.
Wow.
No, it couldn't have been. We spent my honeymoon there in 72.
They started to pull out, Pete. That was after Blount crashed his plane on the way home.
Ah,
They left Bellows Falls around 83, 84, maybe
Yeah.
85. They took-
Totally got out, yeah, around 1980. Because they were going to scrap a lot of the engines on site. I was pretty familiar with what went on because I did the photography for them and did operate the 15 a few times. So, but once he went, it started to fall apart because it was one man show when you really thought of it.
I would have been a very small kid, but my grandparents took me there in the late 60s or early 70s. I was small. I have very only vague memories of ever seeing it, but that was whatever it was, I was really little. So
Well, it was good. It was good the National Park Service took it over. That makes it a little bit less of a one-man show.
yeah,
Eric, when did you grow up? You're still playing with trains.
I know. I'm not growing up. I have no plan on
That's
growing
right.
up.
No need
Nope.
to it.
No, not happening on this watch. My kids grew up. I didn't.
Well,
Yeah, and then you wonder, who gave them permission to do that?
I know, seriously.
you know, Jeff talked about trying to get his sons into it. Well, I had 5 of them. I think maybe one of them dabbled in it. But with grandkids, it's a lot easier.
Yeah,
They love it.
that's awesome.
Well, thanks an awful lot, Jeff, for a great show. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
awesome.
excellent.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to call this a night at this point. Anybody have any last questions for Jeff?